Welcome friends, in this video let's discuss about directive principles of state policy. These directive principles of state policies are enumerated in the part 4 of the constitution. That means these are listed in the part 4 of the constitution. In part 3 we have fundamental rights, and these are covered from article 36 to article 51. And also we know that our constitution was formed by including various important elements from the constitutions of the world. And this concept of directive principles of state policy was also borrowed from the Irish constitution, that means the constitution of the Ireland of 1937. And our constitutional maker, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, called this directive principles of state policy as novel feature of the constitution. And also, along with fundamental rights, this DPSP is considered as philosophy of the constitution because of their important principles and various philosophical foundations which guides the constitution in meeting the aspirations of the people. And the constitutional interpreter Granville Astin called the directive principles of state policy as conscience of the constitution. That means the inner voice of the constitution. So please include these terms in the examination. You can fetch more marks. And let's look at the important features of the constitution. The first is that these directive principles are the ideals. Okay, these are the ideals that must be followed by the state government as well as the central government and other administrative bodies while formulating policies, laws and legislations. Okay, and these ideals, okay, we know that in directive principles of state policy has various principles, okay, including organization of village panchayats on on independent lines, and also to protect environment, to provide dignity of labor, and to protect weaker sections by providing social assistance. These are all the principles, various principles which are mentioned in the directive principles. So these principles must be followed by the government at all the levels, at the central level by the parliament, at the state level, state legislature as well as the state government, at the local level, including the panchayats as well as the urban local bodies. These must be followed. These directive principles must be followed while formulating laws, policies, and also programs. So this acts as an ideal. The second thing is that these are the instructions. These directive principles are the instructions to the legislature, executive, and various administrative bodies while governing the country and respective areas. Okay, these are all the instructions, and this article 36 defines the state. So for the convenience of interpreting the directive principles of state policy, so the article 36 defines the term state. This definition of state has been given a broadest of the broadest terms. It includes various administrative bodies ranging from the parliament and the union government at the center, and state legislature and the state government at the state level, and urban local bodies, panchayats, and various local bodies at the local level, and also the administrative bodies, various organizations, corporations which have public character are included in the definition of the state according to article 36 of the directive principles. So this provides broader connotation which provides scope for implementing these directive principles of state policy by these organizations. So this is the important thing here. And most importantly, this DPSP resemble the instrument of instruction that were mentioned in Government of India Act 1935, that is the pre-independent legislature. So what is this instrument of instruction of Government of India Act 1935? These are the instructions which were provided by the British government, okay, to viceroys and governor generals who are governing the Indian subcontinent. Okay, these are the instructions which are provided by the British government to the viceroy and governor general and governors for governing the country in a better way. So this directive principles of state policy is similar to the instrument of instructions. So these are all the instructions provided by the constitution instead of the British government here now. These are the instructions provided by the constitution to various administrative bodies of the government to follow a certain principles while formulating legislation and also while governing the country. So this is important here. And these directive principles constitute comprehensive economic, social and political programs. So includes various economic programs, social programs, and also political programs. Whereas the fundamental rights includes only the political part. It provides the only political rights like freedom of speech and expression, okay, right to assemble, right to make association, right to profess any profession. But in Directive Principles of State Policy, it not only includes the political philosophies and programs, it also includes the economic and social aspects as well, along with the political aspects. So the importance lies in this broad coverage of the Directive Principles of State Policy. And the fifth important feature is that these are not justiciable. That means the government if any administrative body is not following the directive principles of state policy while formulating laws and also governing the country, they are not they cannot be dragged to the court because they are not following these directive principles. So these are not legally enforced by the courts. So these are only the principles which must be followed by the state. So this is the thing here. And the article, but at the same time, the Article 37 itself mentioned that the directive principles are the fundamental in the governance of the country, and it shall be the duty of the state to apply these principles in making laws. Okay, so even though these are not legally enforced by the court, okay, Article 37 itself mentioned that these are fundamental in the governance of the country. Okay, these are fundamental for governing and administering the country, and it shall be the duty of the state. Here the state as defined in the Article 36, okay, includes various administrative bodies at various levels at the center, state, local bodies, as I mentioned earlier, to apply these principles in making laws. Okay, and the seventh important feature is that this directive principles of state policy helps the court, Supreme Court as well as the High Court, in examining and determining the constitutional validity of the law. For example, if any act made by the parliament or state legislature is in violation of the fundamental right, but if it provides for meeting the obligation of a directive principle of state policy, it can still be held constitutional by the Supreme Court and High Courts, because directive principle of state policy is also equally important as that of fundamental rights. Whereas here another important thing here is that here fundamental rights provides the individual right. Okay, here the individuals are protected from the states states violative acts. Okay, in directive principles of state policy, here the community is protected. Okay, here the community is the area of concern in the directive principles of state policy, and the group of people, not the single individual. So at times, even though if certain act is violation of the fundamental right, if it is providing for any of the directive principles of state policy, it can be held legal, valid by the court itself. So another important thing is that the constitution per se do not classify directive principles into various classifications, but for the convenience for studying the directive principles, the directive principles are classified logically into three important sections on the basis of their content and directions which is given to the government. This includes socialistic principles, which are based on the ideology of the socialism and economic justice, and Gandhian principles, which are based on the principles which are followed and preached by the Mahatma Gandhi during independence movement. And the third one is liberal intellectual principles. These are the principles which are based on the liberalism, that means the freedom of speech and expression, international cooperation, human dignity, dignity of the labor. Okay, these are all the important things. And here, as I mentioned earlier, the directive principles can be classified, not classified by the constitution, but it can be classified into three important groups, that is social, Gandhian and liberal intellectual principles. So in our next video, let's look at these social, Gandhian and liberal intellectual principles separately in detail, so that we can get some hold on the topic. So if you have not watched my fundamental rights videos, please click here and watch those things and come back, because it makes sense. I have covered in detail on the fundamental rights. So thanks for watching. In the next video, let's cover the socialistic principles.